If you've insured your rangeland in the past and plan to do so again, you may be aware the USDA has made some changes to the coverage. Aaron Berger talked with us earlier this week to explain the new Rainfall Index program.
Well, the changes this year, the USDA RMA has moved the pasture, range, and forage insurance from what had been a vegetative index, which was based on looking at historic satellite imagery photos of forage during what we would consider the growing season, and then comparing the color of that satellite imagery to historic averages and then determining a loss based on that. For 2013, they're moving to what's called a Rainfall Index, which is based on precipitation in 2-month intervals. And so that's the change this year from what it has been for 2012 and some years prior when this was a pilot project.
And it's not an either or, correct?
That's correct. As I understand it, for 2013, it is a rainfall index, which is based on precipitation. It's single peril insurance, meaning it's not based on loss due to hail or anything else on pasture, range, or forage production acres. It's simply on precipitation.
And how is that rainfall measured, Aaron? Because obviously precipitation varies from location to location.
Right. The way the insurance works, as I understand, is it's based on, you look at some grids. They have grids all across the state. You find where your acres are at, and then you would insure your acres within that grid. NOAA is who keeps track of the precipitation information, and so depending on where you're at in that grid, they are insuring, or you're basically insuring your acres with the whole grid. And so it's possible that you could have dry conditions on your farm or ranch, and the rest of that area that you're insured with could get above normal precipitation and you wouldn't get an indemnity. Conversely, though, it's also possible you could have a cloud burst a few times over your particular acres, and for that grid, maybe it's drier, and so you would get paid when others around you maybe didn't get the precipitation they would have normally gotten. So I think you need to just realize over the long term, I think it washes those things out if you take insurance consistently. For individual years or two, you could see some differences that maybe don't correlate with what happens exactly on your place with the grid as a whole.
Let's talk about the qualities of the program, Aaron. Are there the different levels of coverage? What are they? And are there different options for if you're going to use it for haying or grazing?
Right, there's really two options. You can pick grazing or haying. Haying has a much higher value than grazing because they're expecting those acres to be higher levels of forage production, which you would harvest for hay. So you want to pick whether grazing or haying, and then you want to pick your level of productivity. They have some county averages or state averages for those particular acres, either haying or grazing. And then you select that level of productivity. It can be anywhere from 60 to 150%. And so you want to look at that and say, based on what I think my productivity is of my land, how does that value compare to what I expect? And then you might adjust it accordingly. And then the level of coverage is anywhere from 70 to 90%. And so you can pick anywhere from 70 to 90% of precipitation for the months that you want to insure. Now it's broken up into 2-month intervals, like January, February, March, and you have to pick at least two 2-month intervals, and you can't insure more than 60% of your coverage in any one of those 2-month intervals. So as we look at precipitation for Nebraska and when it affects forage production, really for us, the critical months, depending on where you're at in the state, are March through July. March, April, May, June, July are those critical months. And so I really encourage people to look at those months and think about breaking those up in terms of where they might want to put their insurance coverage in. You can only insure 60% of your coverage within a 2-month period. So if you say, I think April, May are really the critical months for me, you might put 60% in those 2 months and then 40% in June and July or something like that. The nice thing is that USDA RMA website has a decision support tool that allows producers to go through and put some values in, and then they can look at historic averages. It allows them to put that in. You can look at 30, 40-year time frames and see when indemnities would have occurred based on what your insurance level and when you did that. And so it can really be, I think, a valuable tool to look at to say, if I was to do this, what would it have done over the last 30 years? And that can give you some insight into the decision you may want to make going forward. The other thing is important to understand is that USDA Risk Management Agency has decided that this is a program they want producers to engage in, and so it's subsidized to some degree. If you're covered at 90%, it's subsidized by 51%, meaning that premium, you pay 49%, the risk management agency covers the other 51%. At 80 and 85% coverage, they'll actually cover 55% of their premium cost, and at 70 and 75, they'll cover 59. And so as you run some scenarios and you think about your options, you need to think about that as well in terms of what you get in return for the dollar you spend.
If you're interested in seeing how the new rainfall index would have worked in past years, Aaron has a webinar on the Beef website that uses historical data scenarios. The deadline for participating in the Pasture Rangeland Forage Insurance Program is November 15th.